The lunchroom was Alex Thompson's battlefield, and every day he lost. At 13, Alex had learned to navigate the social minefield of middle school with the careful precision of someone who knew that one wrong step could trigger an avalanche of humiliation. He'd mapped out routes through the hallways that avoided the popular kids' territory. He'd mastered the art of eating quickly and quietly, head down, hoping invisibility might serve as armor against the cruel words that seemed to follow him everywhere. Alex was what adults politely called a big kid. At 5'6" and 200 pounds, he stood out in a school where being different was dangerous, and being overweight was an invitation for torment. The bullying had started in 6th grade, with subtle exclusions and whispered comments, but by 7th grade, it had evolved into something more vicious. Daily taunts about his weight, jokes about how much he ate, cruel nicknames that stuck like scars, and the constant underlying message that he was less worthy of respect because of how he looked. The worst part wasn't even the words, it was the way they made him feel about himself. Alex had begun to internalize the cruelty, to believe that maybe the bullies were right, maybe he was lazy, maybe he was disgusting, maybe he deserved the treatment he received. The shame had become so heavy that some days it felt harder to carry than his actual weight. At home, Alex's parents, Janet and Michael Thompson, knew something was wrong, but couldn't get their son to open up about it. They'd noticed his grades slipping, his reluctance to go to school, the way he'd stopped talking about friends or social activities. When they asked if he was being bullied, Alex would shrug and deflect, too ashamed to admit what was happening and too afraid that parental intervention would only make things worse. "I'm fine," had become Alex's standard response to any question about his well-being, even though everyone could see he was anything but fine. The Family Feud opportunity had come through Alex's Aunt Sarah, who worked in local television production. The show was doing a special episode featuring families who had overcome challenges, and she'd thought the Thompsons would be perfect candidates. What she didn't know was that their biggest challenge was currently unfolding in the hallways of Lincoln Middle School, invisible to the adults who surrounded Alex every day. When Janet first mentioned the possibility of being on Family Feud, Alex's reaction was immediate panic. "I can't go on TV," he'd said, his voice tight with anxiety. "What if people from school see me? What if they make fun of me? Even more." "Alex," Janet had said gently, "what are you talking about? Who's making fun of you?" That question had opened the floodgates. For the first time since the bullying began, Alex told his parents everything. About Marcus Williams, the 8th grader who called him Fatlex instead of Alex. About the group of girls who mooed when he walked by. About the time someone put a note in his locker that said, "Lose weight or lose respect." About the way he ate lunch in the library. Now, because the cafeteria had become a gauntlet of humiliation. "Why didn't you tell us?" Michael had asked, his voice breaking as he watched his son's pain pour out. "Because," Alex had whispered, "I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I am everything they say I am." That conversation had changed everything for the Thompson family. They'd immediately contacted the school, demanded meetings with administrators, and insisted on anti-bullying interventions. But more importantly, they'd begun the work of rebuilding Alex's shattered self-esteem and helping him understand that other people's cruelty said nothing about his worth as a person. The Family Feud taping was scheduled 6 weeks after that conversation. By then, Alex had started seeing a counselor who specialized in helping children deal with bullying. He'd begun to understand that the problem wasn't with him. It was with people who had learned to make themselves feel bigger by making others feel smaller. Going on this show, his counselor had said, could be a chance to practice being proud of who you are in front of other people. It could be a chance to remember that you're more than what bullies say about you. Alex had agreed to do the show, but his anxiety remained high. What if he said something stupid? What if people watching made fun of him? What if the bullies at school saw him and found new ammunition for their attacks? The Thompson family team consisted of Alex, his parents, his Aunt Sarah, and his 15-year-old sister Emma, who had been Alex's fiercest defender throughout the bullying ordeal. Emma had gotten in trouble at school twice for confronting kids who were mean to her brother, and she'd made it clear that anyone who messed with Alex would have to deal with her first. Steve Harvey noticed Alex immediately during the pre-show warm-up. There was something about the young man's careful posture, the way he seemed to take up as little space as possible, despite his size, the hypervigilance that suggested someone who was used to monitoring his environment for threats. Steve had seen it before, in kids who'd learned that the world could be cruel and unpredictable. "Alex," Steve said during introductions, approaching him with the gentle energy he reserved for contestants who seemed particularly nervous. "How you feeling today, young man?" Alex looked up at Steve with eyes that seemed older than his 13 years. "I'm nervous, Mr. Harvey," he said honestly, "but I'm glad to be here with my family." Steve nodded, sensing there was more to this young man's story. "Well, you look sharp today. That's a nice shirt." The compliment was simple, but it hit Alex unexpectedly. He wasn't used to positive comments about his appearance from adults outside his family. The game began against the Rodriguez family, from California, and both teams proved competitive. Alex was quieter than the others initially, more observant, but when he did speak up with answers, they were thoughtful and often correct. He had a sharp mind and a broad knowledge base, qualities that his bullies had never bothered to notice or acknowledge. Steve found himself drawn to Alex throughout the game. There was something about the young man's combination of intelligence and apparent fragility that made Steve want to encourage him, to help him see whatever strength his family obviously saw in him. It was during the fourth round that the question came that would change everything. "We surveyed 100 people," Steve announced. "Name something that makes someone strong." Alex was at the podium. The question felt like it was speaking directly to him, asking him to define the very quality he'd been struggling to find in himself. He looked back at his family, then at the audience, then at Steve. For a moment, he considered giving a safe answer, something like muscles or exercise, that would get points without revealing anything personal. But something about being on this stage, about representing his family, about the possibility that someone watching might be going through what he was going through, made him choose honesty. "Getting up every day even when people are mean to you," he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a revelation. Steve's expression shifted immediately from game show host to something much more human and protective. "Getting up every day even when people are mean to you," Steve repeated softly. "That's a powerful answer, Alex. Tell me more about that." Alex swallowed hard, realizing he'd just opened a door to a conversation he wasn't sure he was ready to have on national television. But something about Steve's gentle tone, about the way his family was looking at him with love and encouragement, made him want to continue. "Sometimes people say mean things about how you look," Alex said, his voice gaining strength. "They call you names, they make jokes about you, they try to make you feel like you're not worth anything. And it hurts. It really hurts." The studio had grown completely quiet, everyone drawn into Alex's honest vulnerability. But getting up and going to school anyway, being kind to people even when they're not kind to you, not letting their words make you into someone mean like them. "I think that's what makes someone strong." Behind Alex, Janet was crying. Michael had his arm around Emma, who was looking at her brother with obvious pride. The audience was completely silent, recognizing that they were witnessing something profound. Steve set down his cards and approached Alex directly. Something in the young man's words had hit him deeply. The wisdom that comes only from surviving cruelty, the strength that's forged in the fire of other people's meanness. "Alex," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "that's not just strength, that's heroism." Alex looked up at Steve with surprise. "I don't feel like a hero, Mr. Harvey. Most days I feel like a coward. Like I should fight back, but I'm too scared." "Son," Steve said, kneeling down so he could look Alex directly in the eyes, "heroes never feel like heroes. That's what makes them heroes. A hero is someone who does the right thing, even when they're scared. Someone who chooses kindness, even when the world is cruel to them. Someone who gets up every day and faces their battles, even when those battles seem too big to win." Alex was crying now, years of pain and self-doubt pouring out. "But what if they're right?" he whispered. "What if I really am everything they say I am?" Steve's expression intensified with the kind of protective fierceness that comes from watching someone you care about hurt themselves with lies. Alex, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Steve said. Bullies don't pick on people because there's something wrong with their victims. Bullies pick on people because there's something wrong with them. They're hurting inside, so they try to make other people hurt too. But that doesn't make their words true. He placed his hands gently on Alex's shoulders. You are not too big. You are not too anything. You are exactly who you're supposed to be, and anyone who can't see that is blind. Your worth isn't determined by what cruel people say about you. Your worth is determined by your character, your kindness, your courage, and son, you have more courage than anyone in this studio. The audience began to applaud, but Steve held up his hand, indicating he wasn't finished. I want you to know something, Steve continued. Every single person in this studio, every person watching at home, we all see your strength. We see your heart. We see a young man who's been through something difficult and chosen to remain kind. That's not weakness. That's power. Alex sobbed openly now, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of shame or pain. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of being seen and valued for who he really was. Can I tell you a secret? Steve asked. Alex nodded. I was bullied too when I was your age. Kids made fun of the way I talked, the way I dressed, the fact that my family didn't have much money, and for years, I believed what they said about me. I thought I wasn't good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. Alex's eyes widened with surprise. But you know what I learned? The people who try to tear you down are usually fighting battles you can't see. They're dealing with pain they don't know how to handle, so they try to give it to someone else. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it explains it. And more importantly, it means their words aren't about you. They're about them. Steve stood up and addressed the entire studio. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex just taught us something that most adults never learn. He taught us that real strength isn't about being the biggest or the toughest. Real strength is about being kind when the world is cruel. It's about showing up when showing up is hard. It's about refusing to let other people's pain become your identity. The applause that followed was thunderous, but what moved Alex most was seeing his family's faces, the pride, the love, the way they were looking at him like he'd just done something extraordinary. Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card. Alex, he said, I want you to have this. Not because you're inspiring, though you are, but because you're a leader. You understand something about courage that could help other kids who are going through what you went through. If you ever want to share that gift, you call me. Then Steve did something that would become one of the most replayed moments in Family Feud history. He removed his suit jacket and approached Alex. This jacket has been with me through thousands of shows, he said. But today, it belongs to someone who showed me what real courage looks like. You wear this, and remember that you're not just strong, you're a hero, and heroes change the world. One act of kindness at a time. As Steve draped his jacket over Alex's shoulders, the young man felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Complete acceptance of himself exactly as he was. The jacket was enormous on his frame, but he wore it with a dignity that surprised everyone, including himself. Thank you, Mr. Harvey, Alex said, his voice clear and strong, for helping me remember who I really am. Thank you, Steve replied, for showing all of us what heroism looks like. The episode aired 6 weeks later and immediately went viral. The clip of Alex's definition of strength was shared millions of times, but more importantly, it started conversations about bullying, about the difference between physical strength and emotional resilience, about the courage required to remain kind in the face of cruelty. Alex received thousands of messages from other kids who were being bullied, thanking him for making them feel less alone. But the message that meant the most came from a boy in Texas who wrote, I was going to give up because the bullies at my school were so mean. But after seeing you, I realized that giving up would let them win. Thank you for showing me that being different is not being less. The response wasn't universally positive. There were cruel comments online from people who focused on Alex's weight rather than his message. But Alex found that those voices seemed smaller now, less powerful, because he'd found his own voice and discovered that it was stronger than their criticism. When Alex returned to school, The Monday after the episode aired, something had changed, not just in how other people saw him, but in how he saw himself. The bullying didn't stop immediately. Changing school culture takes time, but Alex's response to it was different. When Marcus Williams called him Fatlex in the hallway, Alex turned around and said clearly, "My name is Alex. I'd appreciate it if you'd use it." When the group of girls made their usual cruel comments, Alex looked directly at them and said, "I hope whatever's hurting you gets better soon." The bullies didn't know how to respond to this new version of Alex. Someone who refused to be diminished by their words, who met their cruelty with dignity, and sometimes even compassion. 3 months after the Family Feud episode aired, Alex was invited to speak at an anti-bullying assembly at his school. Standing at the podium wearing Steve's jacket, now altered to fit him properly, but still recognizable, he addressed his classmates with a confidence that surprised everyone who knew his story. "I used to think that being strong meant fighting back when people were mean to me," he told the assembly. "But I learned something different. Real strength is choosing to be kind, even when people aren't kind to you. Real strength is getting up every day and being yourself, even when people try to make you feel like yourself isn't good enough." He paused, looking out at faces that included some of his former tormentors. "To anyone here who's being bullied, you are not what they say you are. You are not to anything. You are exactly who you're supposed to be, and their words can't change that, unless you let them." Then he addressed the bullies directly. "And to anyone here who has been mean to other people, I want you to know that I forgive you. Hurt people, and I hope you find better ways to deal with whatever pain you're carrying. But I also want you to know that your words have power, and you get to choose whether you use that power to lift people up or tear them down." The standing ovation that followed was led by teachers and administrators, but what moved Alex most was seeing some of his former bullies clapping too, their faces showing something that looked like recognition, and maybe even remorse. Alex began volunteering with the school's peer counseling program, helping other students who were dealing with bullying. He discovered that he had a gift for listening, for understanding pain, for helping people see their own strength even when they couldn't see it themselves. The weight that had made him a target became less central to his identity as he focused on other aspects of himself, his intelligence, his empathy, his growing confidence. He started playing in the school's chess club, joined the debate team, and even auditioned for the spring musical. Not because he'd lost weight, though he was working with a nutritionist and therapist to develop a healthier relationship with food and exercise, but because he'd learned that his worth wasn't determined by his size. Today, Alex Thompson is a high school sophomore, a peer counselor, and an advocate for anti-bullying programs in his district. He still wears Steve's jacket to speaking engagements and important events, and it's become a symbol not just of his appearance on Family Feud, but of his journey from victim to survivor to advocate. He keeps Steve's business card in his wallet, and he's used it twice. Once when he was struggling with anxiety about starting high school, and once just to say thank you on the anniversary of the show. Both times, Steve answered personally, reminding Alex of his strength and his bright future. The bullying at school didn't disappear overnight, but the culture began to shift as more students spoke up, as Alex's example inspired others to choose kindness, and as administrators took stronger action against harassment. Alex's courage had created ripples that extended far beyond his own experience. In his room, next to Steve's framed business card, Alex keeps a photo from that day, himself wearing the oversized jacket, standing between Steve Harvey and his family, all of them beaming with pride. Below the photo is a quote that Alex wrote himself: "Strength isn't about being the biggest person in the room, it's about being the kindest person, even when kindness is hard." Because Alex had learned that true heroism isn't about fighting dragons or saving the world in dramatic ways. Sometimes, heroism looks like a 13-year-old boy who chooses to get up every morning, walk into a hostile environment, and refuse to let cruelty make him cruel in return. Sometimes heroism looks like kindness in the face of meanness, dignity in the face of humiliation, and hope in the face of despair. And sometimes, the strongest person in the room is the one who's been broken, but refuses to stay broken, who's been hurt, but chooses not to hurt others, who's been told they're not enough, but decides to believe they're exactly enough. Alex Thompson had learned that lesson the hard way. But he'd learned it completely, and in learning it, he'd become exactly what Steve Harvey had seen in him from the beginning. Not just a survivor, but a hero.